Hello, I'm Ethan Johnson from Campus WheelWorks, and today we're going to learn how to fix a flat. So step one is to be prepared. You need to know what to have with you so you can fix a flat on the side of the road. Hopefully you're not on the side of the road learning this just now, but in that case, I just wanted to cover a few things and then we'll get right down to business. You probably want to keep all of your flat fixing things in a seat bag, kind of like this. You can mount this right under here. You can get them at your local bike shop, like Campus WheelWorks. In that bag, you want to have a spare tube. This is even if you're running a tubeless tire, though I will be going through a tubeless tire fix in a separate video because there are some differences to that. However, you can just put a tube into a tubeless tire, so a lot of this will be relevant. I like to take my tubes and wrap them up with masking tape because it's very easy to get off, and then I can also write what the size is on there so I don't get it mixed up with my other bikes, my wife's bikes, etc. You can even just write your name and what bike it is, but that is a little pro tip for you. So you got your tube, you got your pair of tire levers. These things usually stick together. You have two for the case that you have a very tight tire. Two can help you get it off. Sometimes they even come in pairs of three. Then you're going to have an air source. This might be a mini pump, like so. This one has a universal head, works for both Presta and Schrader. Or you might use CO2. CO2 is much quicker and more efficient. This CO2 pump threads onto either Presta or Schrader valves and then has an open and close valve on it. This gives you a lot of control and a very secure fit. This is probably my favorite head to use. This one is made by Giant. It will accept any size cartridge from 12 threaded on up to 25, 50 if you have something crazy. For a road bike or a hybrid like this, I usually carry 16-gram cartridges. For a mountain bike or a wider tired gravel bike or road bike, touring bike, a 20-gram or 25-gram might be nice. For fat bike or mountain bike, always 25. Go with the big dog. There are even some big air canisters out there that you can get with like 50 gram. Those are kind of hard to find, but I think 25s will work. Fat bike might even take a couple of those. So always carry more than one cartridge because it's possible that you screw up the first one, and also possible that you get a second flat because flats happen. My record is 5 in one day, and I threw a pump in the woods that day, almost threw my bike in the woods that day. But you know, when bad things strike, they can come in threes or whatever the saying is. So a couple cartridges, inflation device of your choice. CO2, fast and quick, but it's kind of wasteful, but that's my preference. Pump will last you forever, but after you're already exhausted, sitting on the side of the road and pumping like 1,000 times is probably not what you want to spend your time doing. Good to also carry a patch kit of some sort. I prefer the glue-on permanent style patches. They use a vulcanizing fluid that, if you do it right, makes a permanent seal. I'll be doing a separate video for patching because it's a whole thing in of itself. There also are really quick glueless patches like this, which basically are like a sticker. They'll get you home. Sometimes they are a semi-permanent fix, but they're not quite as long-lasting as the vulcanized patches. I often save my old tube, bring it home, patch it, and then that becomes the spare tube. Just make sure your patch is really good. Then the last thing you might want is a multi-tool of some sort. Yours could even have a special message on it like this. But some multi-tools also come with an integrated tire lever. I would not use that integrated tire lever for my general maintenance flat fixes. I would save that for an emergency. Because when you wear it out, you aren't going to be able to just buy that tire lever to replace it. And it's kind of a bummer to have a tool with a missing part on it. However, if you do forget all your tire levers and you happen to have this tool, you're like, sweet, then you can use it. This one also doubles as a spoke wrench and looks like a 8 or 9 millimeter. Multi-tools come in many varieties, but if you have a through axle, there's a good chance you're going to need it to remove your wheel. If you have a quick release and rim brakes, you usually don't need any tools to get your wheel off. All right, I think that's it. So now we're riding down the road and we get a flat. It's a tough tire. There we go. We ran over a giant awl in the middle of the road. So, you hear that terrible hiss, your bike might start sagging a little bit and bouncing. Those are all signs that you have a flat tire. So, just a point of interest, it's not good to ride a flat tire very long. If it's still some air in it, get as far as you can or get to a nice safe place. If it's raining, find your way under a bridge or under a nice big tree, as long as it's not crazy lightning, and find a good place to change your flat. Riding it flat can damage the tire, the rim, put more holes in the tube, so your tube might not be patchable in the case you did need to do that. So best to just get it off, get it fixed, get back on the road. And once you are practiced at this, that shouldn't take very long. So let's work our way through this. You want to shift the bike into the highest gear. If you're riding it, you could be doing that already as you're slowing down. That puts it in the smallest cog, which makes the wheel easiest to remove. Then almost all brakes other than disc brakes have a quick release. This one is a V-brake. You remove a little rubber grub, squeeze the two arms together, and lift up on the needle, getting the cable between the little cut in the cable carrier. I'll do a couple close-ups to show how that works on different bikes. Another look at the V-brake. You slide off the little rubber grub, squeeze the two arms together. I do that with one hand. That may or may not work depending on the size of your hand. I pull on the noodle with my other hand. Guide it with my thumb to get the cable out of the top of the little groove in the cable carrier. That opens it up, get your wheel out, put it back in, one hand. I pull on the noodle, which also controls that arm. Pull this one over, slide the cable back into the groove in the cable carrier, get the noodle to pop into place, slide a little rubber grub on, squeeze it, both pads should move and it should spin freely. With a road caliper like this, you have a little lever here. You pop that open, and that is your brake quick release. Slide your tire out to remove it, get it back in, close that lever, and it should spin free. This is called a cantilever brake. Has a cable that comes down from the middle. Sometimes they're also called center pole. This has one side with a little groove in the top, and there's also a little thing to hold on to. This is called your A wire. If you push on that while also pulling this in, that releases the cable, allows you to get your wheel out, put it back in, pretty easy. Move this over, put it back in place. Again, pad should move, wheel should spin freely. Here we have a disc brake through axle wheel. This is a front wheel. I have the bike flipped upside down just to make it easier to see. With this, through axles are pretty easy. It's basically like a bolt, a through bolt. So you just loosen it with your hand. This being a giant, this is removable, and this also works for the rear wheel. But just put it in there. It's a 5 millimeter Allen if you didn't have this. You just thread that till it stops coming out, pull it out. That's removed, wheel just comes out. No quick release on the disc brake. Putting it back in, guide that rotor back in to the brake, put the through axle back in, tighten it down. That's that. For the upside down bicycle, we have this orientation here. We're also going to be working on a bike with a disc brake and a through axle in this situation. First thing we want to do, shift the bike into its highest gear if we didn't remember to do that when it was upright. Pedal the bike. Okay, through axle either has a little wing on it or it requires the use of an Allen wrench. This one is a 5mm, so I'm going to take my I Love Alex Allen wrench and put it in there. Just thread it and all the way out. At some point it will kind of free up or stop coming towards you. Just pull it out, put it somewhere safe. Try not to get a bunch of grit on the grease that hopefully is on the threads. Then we're going to pull back on the derailleur while lifting the wheel up. As you can see, it's kind of an upper and lower chain there. We just want to come off the bottom and out. When we're putting this wheel back on, it's just the reverse process. Go in, pull back on the derailleur. This time I kind of pull back on the cage because it's the furthest part back. Roll this down in, set the wheel on the highest gear, guide the disc into that groove, and you're in place. Then just put your through axle back in, thread it down till it's tight, and you're good to go. Here's another potential tricky one. A lot of Shimano derailleurs on bikes with 1-bys have a clutch on them. You need to turn that off to make your wheel easier to remove. To do so, there's this little lever here, and you just flip it from on, which is up there, to off. You also want to remember to switch that back when you're done. That clutch controls this pivot and makes it much harder to move when it's on. So once it's off, it moves easier. It'll be much easier to get your wheel off your bike. In this instance, again, we want to get it in the highest gear. Pedal this crusty, dirty thing. This one happens to have a quick release, but if we're a through axle, we'd just be threading out that through axle. And again, with this bigger derailleur, you want to pull this pivot forward or push the derailleur up like this to give you some slack as you pull that out. Out, going back in, set the chain into the highest cog, guide the disc back into the brake, and we're back in. Thread your quick release down to the proper tension, tighten it, turn your clutch back on, and you're good to go. SRAM 1-by derailleurs use a different style clutch that is always on, but they have another feature to help you remove your wheel. In this instance, there's a little button right here with the emblem of a lock on it, like a padlock. You pull your bottom part of your cage forward, and then you push on the lock and then let the cage come back and rest on it. It's basically just like a rest. This holds it forward and gives you all this nice slack on your chain, making it much more easy to remove the wheel. This bike has a through axle with a permanently attached lever on it. So I pull that out like so. Then you don't have to pull on the derailleur here because it's held in place. Just roll this back a little bit and you can lift the wheel right out. To put it back in, guide the wheel in, get back between the two chains, set the chain on the highest cog, guide the disc in to the brake, and it should fall right into place. Put your axle back in, thread it in until it's tight. Then, to disengage that clutch lock, just push the cage forward and it releases. You can pedal it, make sure it goes into whatever gear it was in, and you're good to go. Next, we're going to remove the wheel from the bicycle. This has a quick release. I also didn't mention, on the side of the road, your bike's probably not in a repair stand, but this is how I would do it in a professional environment or at home, which is also kind of a professional environment. I also would probably not flip my bike upside down, but that is what a lot of people do. If you do that, be careful not to damage the screen on your cycling computer, Garmin, or any other accessories you have in your handlebars. If your phone's mounted there, don't flip your thing over with the phone on it. Just be careful with that. But I will also go over how all of this process looks with the bike upside down, because it's a little more confusing. So we're going to open this quick release lever and the wheel will start to fall out. Take this derailleur and I'm going to put my thumb on the back of it and my fingers on the front and pull it back, and that will help it drop out of the bike. So now we have the wheel out of the bicycle and we can start fixing this flat. If the air isn't already out of your tire, you want to go ahead and do that. Also take off your valve cap and throw it in the woods. Just kidding, don't do that. Always carry out everything that you brought with you. Don't leave anything behind, don't leave any trace. Carry home your busted tube or leave it in a garbage receptacle along the way. Like I said, I always patch mine. So we have our wheel. We get into our flat fix kit. We pull out our tire levers. We may need more than one. So with a wheel like this, I'm going to start opposite the valve. You don't need to do that. You could start over here, but I just start opposite the valve because it's easy to remember, and that way you're not fighting at the toughest part of the tire to remove. This valve, or this tire lever, also has a little hook on it. Don't go into your tire like this and try to pry. You're basically making it twice as difficult. The hook is to scoop in and pull the tire bead out. I've seen this done backwards many times and been like, what the hell? Also on your tire lever, there's a hook. That is so you can do this and hook it on the spoke, like so. So you could then take a second tire lever and hook it over here without needing your hand to hold the first one, and then you can start getting off more of the tire if it is indeed tight, and then you can work from there. This tire is not too tight, so it's going to be fairly easy for me. I probably could have done it with one lever, but I want to show how that works. Just come around here and then carefully scoop the lever all the way around and whoop, comes right off. Then, next, if you can see here, the valve is in line with the label on the tire. This is also how we want to put it back together, and we also want to remember that orientation because it makes it easier to find the cause of the flat. So I'm going to pull the tube out, but I'm not just going to whip it all around and twist things back and forth, so I can keep the orientation straightforward in my mind. So I drop it back down the way I got it. That last part, I'd kind of pinch the tire over and pull the valve out. If you have a Presta tube, that one, you'll have an additional nut here potentially, unless I installed it, because I don't use those most of the time unless it's a tubeless valve. You have to remove that nut to get your tube out of your wheel. So now you can take your wheel and set it down somewhere safe. If you also noticed, I didn't take the tire off completely. I left it halfway on there. Just saves a little time. It's not necessary to remove it entirely. So now we have our tube in its orientation that it came out, and I'm going to go ahead and put some air in here to see if we can find the hole. I'm going to attempt to use the leftover air from my cartridge from the last time I had a flat. Just with this inflator, you just thread it onto the valve, Presta or Schrader. Though with the Presta, you have to unscrew this little top nut, the Presta nut, first. So with this on here, we just open the valve. Oh yeah, found it. So this is a trick that Alex does. I always would take my cartridges off and just get rid of them after they were shot, but he leaves his last cartridge on for just this purpose. Just gives you that little bit of air to find the hole. If you didn't do that, you either have to start using your next cartridge, your freshie, which is okay. Just remember that you want to use as little air as possible to do that. You also, sometimes with a Presta valve, you can blow it up with your mouth, but probably not with enough pressure to really make that come out. So we found our hole. You can take a look at it. We have a single puncture hole here. And holes on tubes can tell you a little bit about what caused them. A single hole like that on the outside of the tube is likely going to be a puncture caused by debris. A hole on the inside of the tube and the inside ring facing the rim is going to be a rim side puncture or abrasion or some sort of thing that might have taken place from the rim strip, which is this little, and here it's green. This green strip can move out of the way and a spoke can puncture the inner tube. Or the holes that are drilled into a double wall rim are very sharp. They can cut into a tube. So it's another thing to look out for. Otherwise, the most common flat is two holes, kind of up and down from one another, and that is a pinch flat. Pinch flats are the most common, usually caused from people not inflating their tires often enough or riding with their tires at too low of a pressure and hitting a curb, a pothole, or some other thing. A broomstick, you know, whatever. Random person. You can pinch flat on all sorts of things. Curbs and potholes are the most common. That usually is a sign that there probably isn't something in your tire, but you should also check the sidewall of your tire to make sure it didn't blow it out, because that's also possible. But pinch flat happens, the tube literally gets pinched between the rim and the tire, and it gets what looks like a snake bite. Another kind of hole that you can see will look like a brush burn or an abrasion, and sometimes that can even be like all over the tube. If you pull your tube out and there's like tube crumble all over it, like black dust, that's a sign that you've probably been riding your bike around with way too low of pressure for a long time, and your tube is literally disintegrating inside that tire. If it's just in a small area, it could be a rough spot in the tire. It could be something like that that's rubbing up against the tube as you're riding. So just some things to look out for. But now that we've found our hole, which is right here, I can align this back up to the tire, and we can match. That's why we keep everything oriented that way. I can match that up to the tire. I know exactly where that hole came from, and then carefully I can run my hand around the inside of that tire and feel for debris. I know I stabbed this with an awl, so there's nothing in there, but you want to be careful of that because it could be something sharp. Most common things are glass, a wire. The wires, I think, come out of radial belted tires that are ridden down past the rubber, but they go through tires all the time, bike tires all the time. It could be a screw, a staple, a nail, who knows? Hypodermic needle. Just you want to be careful. It probably wouldn't hurt to look first if you're not in a big hurry. I usually just dive right in and run my hand around it and roll the dice. So we found our flat, we found the hole in the tube. We matched it up to the tire, made sure there isn't any more debris in the tire. We're going to go ahead and bring our tube home with us. So I'm just going to wear it for now and run your hand around that tire. Take a look at the outside of it. Make sure there isn't anything else sticking in it. If you ran through some glass, odds are that glass stuck to your tire in other places too, and often it sticks to the tire and slowly works its way through. So just clean it off so you're not fixing a flat again in a few minutes down the road. All right, now we're going to take our replacement tube, You can just break off your masking tape and throw it in the woods. No, just kidding. You can stick it on your hat. You can use it to do something else. You know, a lot of backpackers, outdoorsy people like to wrap duct tape around things for use in precarious situations. This could also be one of those. You could also use this to affix a tire boot onto your tire. Tire boot is a situation when you get a hole in your tire that your tube can push through. Good quick fix for that is a $1 bill. You just kind of fold it up and tuck it in there. You can even spend it again someday. A Cliff Bar wrapper, that also works. But with the tape, you could tape it in there, you know, do whatever you like to do with tape. So we got our freshy tube, and we're going to put a fresh cartridge in the inflator. This, I want to make sure the valve is closed so it doesn't all come blowing out as soon as I thread it in. But the way this one works is I thread it in until it punctures. Just heard it puncture, sealed. Thread this on. And initially I want to put just enough air into the tube that it takes the shape of the tube, but with air instead of flat. So if I put this in there now, it's going to get all twisted, and then a few miles from now, it's going to puncture. So just a quick little blast. Oh, well, hello. We can take this off. Remember, this is basically the same for Presta and Schrader valves, though this is a Schrader. Might be a little much, so I'll let a little air out. Remember, just to take the shape. We don't want it like bulbous and huge because it'll actually increase in diameter and it'll be harder to get in there. I'm just gonna set this somewhere for now so it isn't confusing and I don't shove two tubes in my tire. So now this time, remember, we started opposite the valve to remove it. We're gonna start at the valve to put it on. So put the valve in, pull the tire back like so. And basically I'm going to take the tire and pull it up and over the tube. Then stuff that tube in. Stuff, 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 stuff. This is like double stuffed. We go around, stuff it in, stuff it in, stuff it in. Basically into the tire first, and then we're going to stuff it back past the edge of the rim. This one's kind of easy, so this can be much harder with a really tight tire or a really small tire. This is a 38C hybrid tire, a little easier to work with. I got lucky. So we stuff that in, go back around again, triple stuff. The last thing you want to do is pinch that tire with your pinch that tube with your tire lever and have to do this all over again, or have to learn how to patch the tube because now you have two tubes with holes in them. So, again, start at the valve this time to put it on, and we just kind of push the tire over and keep going, and it'll slowly drop in. That's what we're looking for. Drop in, drop in, drop in. Flip it around. I'm just rolling it up and letting it go in. Up and in, up and in, up and in. Now I could probably finish this without a tire lever, which really is the goal. The less you use a tire lever to put a tire on, the less likely you are to pinch it. But when I get to this point and it is tight, what I do, which works with my long arms, it might not work with yours. You might have to put it down and kind of hold it in front of you and do this. But I like to kind of brace it against myself, stand on one foot, hold this side with one hand. This is kind of like my clamp. And then I work from the side closer to me. And I just push a little bit over, kind of as little as possible while still moving and making positive progress. If you go and grab in the middle way over here, you're blindly in there and you're going to pinch the tube. So it's a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. Eventually it'll snap over. Like I said, this one's a little easy, but that's the concept. Now, new tube in, tires on. We want to put some air in this. But we don't necessarily want to go hog wild, and possibly, especially with a looser tire like this, it's pretty easy to either have a low spot or a high spot and have it blow off the rim. So we're going to thread this back on. Thread, 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 thread. Thread until it stops. Then we open the valve and inflate. If you turn it the right way. So I'm going to stop and check that. Take a look around, and I'm basically following this line that goes around the tire. I call this seating the bead, or making sure the bead is seated. Just don't want to see it come up too high anywhere or have it be really low somewhere. If that's the case, you might have to wrestle it up, kind of roll it up from either side if you have a low spot, or you might have to let some air out and kind of push the high spot in and let the low spot kind of come out. But hopefully you got lucky like I did and it's all good. In that case, let's let the rest of the air into the tube. We basically want to fire the whole cartridge in here to get it up to pressure. That's usually the case. It's kind of magic, because something with higher volume, like a mountain bike or a wider tired gravel bike or something, uses a higher volume of air, while a narrower tire uses a higher pressure, but a smaller volume. So the same volume of air might accomplish both of those things. It can either get you more volume with less pressure, or more pressure with less volume, if that makes any sense. Then we'll put our valve cap on, because I'm a good boy and didn't throw it in the woods. All right, so now we are ready to put the wheel back on the bike. Everything is back together, tires inflated, and now your bike may be on the ground upside down, or if maybe upright. In the upright position, you just want to take the derailleur and pull it back. Before, when I was removing the wheel, I kind of grabbed the derailleur because it was still wrapped around the cassette, slightly different. I grab it and kind of push it like this. In this instance, I'm going to pull on this part right here. So put the wheel in, pull back on the derailleur, get the quick release and freewheel in between the chains, slowly bring it up, putting the chain onto the highest or smallest cog, and then it should just kind of fall into place. If you didn't unscrew your quick release too much, at this point you should just be able to close it and be back on the road. However, if you did adjust it, the way to tell if this is at the right pressure, which if it's on the front wheel and that's what you're changing, odds are you had to loosen it more because you have to get past the safety tabs, or lawyer tabs as people call them. In that instance, basically I keep this side in one place and I do my adjusting on the other side. It's basically like a nut in a bolt. So I tighten that or loosen it until this starts getting tight at about, if this is 180 degrees, about here. So like 2/3 of the way through its travel. At that point, it should be tight enough that you kind of have to take your hand and push down on it. Looser than that, it's too loose, it's unsafe. Tighter than that, it's going to be really difficult to get off next time. So just close that. If it's the back wheel or front wheel, you either want them facing back or up, not forward, so they don't get caught on something. Then we're going to have to reattach our brake. If you have a brake with a rim brake with a quick release, I'll show you a few different styles of those. With this V-brake, I take one hand, pull on the noodle. The other hand, I guide the cable carryover, put it in place, and push the grub or rubber back onto the noodle. Give it a few squeezes. It should spin freely like that. If instead you spin it and it's like that, that means you didn't get the wheel centered in the dropouts, and this is a very common problem. It's a fairly quick fix though. So I'll just put this on the ground real quick to show you. You basically want to take the bike, put your hand on the seat, put a little bit of weight on it, and just pop the quick release open. The weight of your hand and the weight of the bike should automatically center it, and then just push it closed again. This works just the same on the front wheel. Then go ahead and pedal your bike to make sure it's in whatever gear it was in. Since now you might be in the highest gear of your bike, you might want to just shift up a couple before you jump on so you can actually pedal it as you ride away. But that is basically it. You've now fixed your own flat tire and you can get back on your ride. All these little tricks aren't that difficult, and with a little practice you can become proficient in them. And having the ability to do this stuff yourself is going to open up a much more broader experiences of riding that you can do, because you'll now be self-sufficient and you'll be empowered to go out and ride further, ride longer, where anytime you're spending more time on the bike, there's more of a chance of a flat because it's just more time on the bike. But being self-sufficient and having some of these basic skills can make your riding so much better. And you'll become the person that your friends rely on your next group ride when they get their first flat. And you get to do what I'm doing now and pass along the good teaching of how to fix a flat to your friends. So thanks for joining me, and you can like and subscribe our videos, follow along. Hopefully going to have some more coming up. And remember, we're Campus WheelWorks, 2 locations in Buffalo, one at 744 Elmwood, the other at 1330 Niagara Street. Show us support. We'll keep the good times rolling. Thank you. Bye.